What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about a brand new HBO Max movie, The Fallout. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what your thoughts on this movie were, if you already saw it, or if you are planning on seeing it, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these reviews, as it helps me out immensely by getting my content out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases, older films, hidden gems, and so much more on a near daily basis. But let's not waste any more time, and let's talk about The Fallout. This stars Jenna Ortega as high schooler Vada, who navigates the emotional fallout she experiences in the wake of a school tragedy. Relationships with her family, friends, and view of the world are forever altered. This is written and directed by Megan Park in her feature directorial debut, and it hit HBO Max this weekend after premiering at South by Southwest last year, where it received critical acclaim. And what an emotional gut punch of a movie. Now, I admit I always get a little nervous going into movies that center around a tragedy, with that being the driving force behind the movie, because done wrong, those can feel a bit overly sentimental, as well-intentioned as they can be, or they might be a bit emotionally manipulative, in that the tragedy is all that defines these characters and there's nothing else present. But we don't get that with this film. It starts off in a way that gives you a good idea of who some of these characters are. It gives you a chance to connect with Vada, her family, and her friends, and get a feel for their distinct personalities for a few minutes, though not for too long before this horrible tragedy strikes. And from there, that's where we get to the meat of the story. And this actually wasn't exactly the movie I was expecting it to be, if I had to be completely honest. I was expecting something much more somber and meditative. I thought this was going to be a moody, slow burner. Now, don't get me wrong. This can be a dark and very emotional film. It tackles some very brutal, traumatic subject matter that's unfortunately still an ongoing issue today, and it very delicately tackles a lot of the trauma that our main characters experience and the differing ways in which they deal with it. But this also takes that grief and that pain that our characters endure, and it tries to redirect it into something surprisingly more positive than I was expecting it to be. Not that other movies centered around moving past a tragedy don't try to have some sort of positive spin, with characters trying to get past what they experience and try to move on with their lives, but you don't see it quite as actively as you do here. In other films, they often feel stuck in this one emotional state of mind for most of the film, and sometimes that can actually happen to us. But this is all about characters making a conscious effort to move forward with their lives and try getting back to something that feels more like who they were, as hard as it may be. It's about how that tragedy doesn't define them. Now, we have moments where they feel clearly cut off from others, and maybe they don't do quite as well with those who they used to have such great relationships with, or they at least struggle to have that connection. But like I said, typically in these sort of films, that comprises a lot of the movie, but that's not the case here. This is a character study about our relationships in the wake of a tragic event, though with it also not being the defining characteristic of everyone we follow. It certainly plays a big part, and that shared trauma a number of our characters feel do spark certain new friendships and new emotions that they're feeling. But as I said, this is very much about making it clear that our tragedies and our grief and our trauma don't define us, and they don't hold power over us, which is something very relatable, even if we don't go through exactly what these characters go through. We especially see this in one scene, which is in the trailer, with Vada and her dad, played by John Ortiz, and he tells her to let out all of her frustration and her anger, and they do it as a way to show that things are hard, but they're going to try getting past it. It's a big sentimental moment, but it's one that also speaks to what this film is ultimately looking to accomplish. And look, it's one of those things that can be easier said than done, especially for some of the heavy subject matter we get here, and Park is clearly aware of that, and the film does a great job of not oversimplifying the pains that these characters go through. This isn't a movie where they say there's some magic solution to getting over something that inflicted such emotional pain on these characters. Like I said, it balances both the ways in which these characters try to move forward, while also showing the struggles along the way, and in a very real, organic manner. There's a balance between the highs and lows. Now, for much of the film, Vada is seen hanging around a popular girl at school named Mia, played by Maddie Ziegler, who she initially had nothing in common with, but they were together at this pivotal point early on. So for much of the film, we see them getting to know one another better, and they bond over their shared experiences, and they see they actually have some things in common, at least on an emotional level. And the performances from these two are phenomenal. Jenna Ortega is already having a great year between this and Scream right off the bat. I've seen her in things before, like she was fun in the newer Babysitter movie, and she was one of the better parts of Yes Day, and it was always clear she had such a great screen presence. But here though, she absolutely crushes it. The raw emotion on display is nothing short of incredible. It's actually kind of a shame Warner Brothers decided to release this so early in the year. Now, it's good because it's a less crowded time of the year and it allows more eyes to get on this film, but this is a performance that Had it been later in the year and it was still fresh on people's minds, I think it could have made a potential impact for next year's award season. But nevertheless, she was excellent here. And Maddie Ziegler was great as well. You may remember her as the title character from Music, which I really didn't like, though by no means did I blame her for the problematic aspects of that film. But to get back to this, here she also gives an exceptional performance as someone from a completely different upbringing and who handles things her own way. When we meet her, she's left all alone at her parents' house, they're gone on a regular basis, and she gets essentially free reign to do as she pleases. And we see how that also has an effect on Vada, who typically has such a tight-knit relationship with her family and always tells them what's going on with her. But the blossoming friendship between Vada and Mia through their shared trauma is what drives a lot of the film. The chemistry between Ortega and Ziegler was great. There are moments that are sweet, there are other moments that are pretty gut-wrenching, and there are even moments that surprisingly got a chuckle out of me, which I was shocked by because I was expecting this to be completely stone-faced 100% serious. But in that mission to make this a somewhat more positive experience while also not downplaying the grief, we do see quite a few light-hearted interactions between the characters, which doesn't throw things off tonally or anything like that. Now, one of the only criticisms I had was the length. Even though it's only 91 minutes and it doesn't really overstay its welcome, but there are a couple of scenes here and there, primarily towards the middle of the movie, that do drag on just a bit. They don't totally ruin the pacing or bring things down, but I think this could have potentially even worked as an 80-minute movie and it still would have been phenomenal. There are also a few storylines with a couple of other characters, primarily a boy named Quentin, played by Niles Fitch, as well as Vada's friend Nick, played by Will Ropp, and they're integral for most of the film, especially early on, and even though they're not quite as prominent as either Vada or Mia, they're still pretty important characters to the story, who we see quite a lot. But of all the characters here, things kind of just drop off with them and in a pretty abrupt way. And I would have liked had there just been some closure there, especially since the character development of everyone here was so rich and pretty consistently, and it would have just been good to see closure for everyone. It just felt a bit odd the way we just don't come back to these two important characters. But even those issues aside, we do get an ending that I'd say works, which I won't spoil, and at the end of the day, it still made this a very effective movie. The Fallout is a gut punch of a film, though it's not quite the movie you think it is. It's certainly dark and it handles weighty subject matter, but it's also about how our grief and how our trauma doesn't hold power over us, and it shows the differing ways in which we look to move past it. It's got a lot of rich character development that's bolstered especially by some stellar writing by Megan Park, as well as two exceptional performances from Maddie Ziegler, and especially Jenna Ortega, who's already off to a very strong start this year. The Fallout gets an 8.5 out of 10. So let me know, did you see The Fallout, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you like the performances? Do you want to see more from Megan Park? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.